My phone buzzed against the granite countertop, jolting me from the early morning haze. I lurched forward and grabbed it as the mug in my other hand trembled, coffee sloshing over its rim. The metallic tang of the dark roast hit my tongue, but my focus snapped to the screen. Unknown number flashed at the top, and a single image lay beneath. I swiped up, curiosity strangled by dread. The photograph showed Emily in a sunlit art studio, her auburn hair catching the morning light as she stood before a half-finished portrait. A man's hand, strong and sure, rested on her shoulder. Marcus Bell, the portrait artist she'd mentioned once. My breath caught, and the low hum of the traffic outside faded into a distant murmur. I froze, coffee cooling in my hand. In the corner of my eye, the clock ticked toward 7:15 a.m., but time itself felt suspended. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of that frozen moment settle over me. The chipped wedding photo taped to the fridge, Emily and me smiling beneath a cascade of rose petals, blurred as my vision narrowed to the image on my phone. I traced her face in the digital photo, her eyes soft, lips curved in a way I didn't recognize, a gaze that belonged to someone else. I set the mug down, listening to the dull clink of ceramic against granite. Heart pounding, I typed with deliberate care, "Who is this?" My thumb hovered over send even as panic tightened my chest. When the message went through, I felt a hollow itch in my throat, as though I'd swallowed gravel. A minute passed. The background noise of the kitchen receded, the refrigerator's hum, the scent of stale cereal boxes lingering in the air, the faint hiss of the coffee machine switching off. I replayed our morning conversation in my mind, her promise to meet a friend for brunch downtown, wondering when her voice had begun to echo lies. My phone buzzed again. 3 words, "We need to talk." The words felt like a blow. I clutched the edge of the counter, knuckles paling. The refrigerator light flickered as I opened it, staring at a carton of eggs I no longer craved. I shut the door slowly, each heartbeat reverberating through my limbs. I focused on the worn photograph taped beside the calendar, June 12, 2015, our wedding day. Sliding a finger over the glass, I tried to summon the warmth of that morning, before cracks started forming in everything we'd built. I stepped away from the counter and pressed my palm to the clock above the sink, a vintage brass piece Emily insisted we hang after our first anniversary. Its second hand clicked forward, marking a rhythm I couldn't follow. I willed my breathing to steady, inhaling the residual coffee aroma as if it could lend me strength. Then I returned to my phone and tapped call back. My voice barely emerged, "Yes, Emily." My tone was measured, betraying none of the storm roiling inside. The line snapped live, and I heard her inhale. I phased into that controlled space I'd practiced countless times before, listening, gathering, preparing. As I sank onto the last clean chair by the table, the morning light slanted through the window, dust motes drifting like ghosts. I lifted the mug again, now cold, and took a sip, tasting nothing but a metallic reminder of how quickly everything can shift. My eyes flicked to the wedding photo one last time, a chapter closing, and the sharp promise of a new, unforgiving beginning. I remember the evening we strung lights along our backyard fence in October 2016. The air smelled of damp leaves and distant wood smoke. Emily handed me a glass of cider, crisp and sweet, and leaned into my shoulder as we admired our work. We toasted plans, finishing the guest bedroom, saving for Napa, adopting a dog. Her laughter was soft against the dusk. Over the years, our routines became sacred. Friday nights at the local Italian bistro, Saturdays repainting the living room, Sunday mornings reading to our daughter over chocolate milk. I still feel the grain of the banister under my palm as I led her to kindergarten, her tiny hand in mine. These moments felt unbreakable. Yet beneath them, cracks formed. I recall a late-night call in February 2018. Emily's voice was hushed as she told me she couldn't sleep and needed a walk. When I offered to join, she said no. I watched her leave in the chill, convincing myself fresh air would calm her restless mind. When our daughter was born, Emily took up painting to unwind. She bought a canvas and paints, working late into the night. One evening, I found a half-finished self-portrait on the counter. She laughed it off, saying she'd enrolled in a weekend art workshop. I stored it away, convinced it was nothing more than a creative hobby. But the clues multiplied. Unfamiliar withdrawals appeared on our bank statement, payments to Bell Studio labeled private lessons. When I questioned her, she dismissed it as art supplies. Her phone would slip under her pillow if she sensed me approaching. When I gently asked to see it, her eyes clouded with annoyance. A friend, Rosa, called me in early spring 2020. She'd seen Emily at a downtown exhibit, laughing with someone who wasn't me, a hand lingering on her back. I thanked Rosa, telling myself trust meant space, that suspicion was a fool's game. Then came my 36th birthday. Emily insisted on a quiet celebration before claiming errands to run. I spent the day anxiously waiting. When she returned, her eyes held something I couldn't recognize. On the kitchen table lay a bouquet of roses and a receipt from a high-end gallery. When I asked why she had been out so long, she offered an apologetic smile but no clear answer. Concern morphed into determination. I sat in our home office late at night, the floorboards creaking under my weight as I scrolled through her text threads, her exchanges with Marcus filled with lines like, "I see your true self," and "Your eyes hold untold stories." The intimacy in his words chilled me. I saved screenshots and slipped them into a folder labeled Evidence, alongside printed bank statements and annotated receipts. The dull glow of the desk lamp illuminated my face, and I felt both hollow and resolute. I noticed more changes. Marcus's car parked 2 blocks away when I pulled into the driveway, the scent of jasmine and sandalwood on her blouse after she claimed to meet friends. I saw her lingering over the easel in our studio room, brushstrokes deliberate and private. I replayed these sightings in my mind, the way her shoulders tensed when someone mentioned art, the distant look in her eyes when I entered the room. Each detail built into a silent indictment. In quieter moments, I replayed happier memories, teaching our daughter to ride a bike, dancing in the kitchen to a scratchy old record, Sunday picnics in the park where lemonade spilled on my shirt and we laughed until we cried. Those recollections now carried a bittersweet edge. The rituals that once bound us, her brushing my hair as I read, folding laundry side by side, now felt overshadowed by deception. Tonight, I sit alone in the living room, the evidence folder on the coffee table. A single lamp flickers, casting long shadows across its cover. My finger traces its edges as resolve settles in. The memories, joy and alarm entwined, have formed a single, undeniable truth: I can't go back to before. I must face what's been hidden and decide how to move forward without losing myself. And as I sit here amid the quiet echo of our life, I understand that every memory, every suspicion, has led me to this moment of reckoning, where I must choose truth over comfort, no matter the cost. I spent the first days after uncovering Emily's betrayal in a daze, but by the end of that week, numbness had given way to determination. On a Thursday morning, I sat across from Clara at her small paralegal office, a narrow room with shelves lined in binders, the scent of fresh paper and printer ink hanging in the air. Through the window, the hospital clock on the neighboring building counted down the seconds. I folded my hands on the desk and laid out a manila envelope bulging with prints, screenshots of text messages between Emily and Marcus, bank statements flagged for large, Bell Studio withdrawals, and the grainy security footage of Emily slipping into the portrait studio after midnight. Clara flipped through each page with methodical calm, her pen tapping lightly against the notepad. "We'll need certified copies of all these documents," she said softly. "And you should prepare a sworn affidavit summarizing the timeline, when you first noticed inconsistencies, when you compiled the evidence." I nodded, feeling a small measure of relief that the chaos in my mind could be organized on paper. That afternoon, I sat at the old mahogany desk in my home office, the same desk I'd used for work presentations and drafting lesson plans for our daughter. Now, it held legal pads and a stack of printed email threads. Each line I wrote in the affidavit felt like chiseling away at a block of granite, revealing a truth I'd once refused to see. In calm, measured sentences, I recounted the late-night calls from early 2018, the self-portrait she'd purchased under the guise of a weekend workshop, and the vibration of her phone whenever I whispered her name in concern. My handwriting was neat, every gap between lines deliberate, no room for doubt or ambiguity. 2 days later, I visited the county clerk's office to notarize the affidavit. The clerk, a stern woman with silver-rimmed glasses, asked me to swear that everything I'd written was true to the best of my knowledge. I pressed my thumb onto the ink pad and left a print on the document, feeling a quiet tremor run through me. As I watched her stamp the paper with the official seal, I realized part of me had been waiting for this moment, an outward affirmation that once you speak truth aloud, it cannot be undone. I next contacted an attorney recommended by Clara, Marcus Reynolds, a tall man in his mid-40s who had built a reputation for handling complex family law cases. His office smelled of leather and coffee, a row of degrees framed on the wall. He greeted me with a firm handshake and led me into a conference room. We sat across from each other at a long table, and I slid the notarized affidavit and evidence folder toward him. He studied the contents in silence, brows furrowing. "When was the last time you had a conversation with Emily about these concerns?" he asked quietly. "Last week," I replied. But she denied everything. She said I was overreacting, stressed from work. I believed her because I wanted to. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his notepad. "We have sufficient evidence to compel discovery. We'll file for temporary custody and seek a protective order in case Marcus interferes or tries to contact her at home." He paused, gaze steady. "You've done well gathering this. Now we need to focus on strategy, protecting your daughter, securing marital assets, and presenting a clear case for divorce based on infidelity." Over the next several days, I moved through each step with clinical precision. I drafted a petition for temporary custody, outlining Emily's betrayal and the potential emotional harm to our daughter if left unsupervised in this environment. I signed a retainer agreement for the attorney's services and arranged a meeting with our financial advisor to evaluate our joint accounts. In our bank portfolio, I circled irregular withdrawals, $1, $200 to Bell Studio on March 14, $2,500 on April 2, and another $900 on May 6, that Emily had quietly obscured by combining them with legitimate household expenses. I printed updated statements and added them to the evidence pile. That evening, I called my brother, Siraj, who answered on the first ring. His voice carried the warmth of familiarity, cutting through my tension. "You sound tense. Everything okay?" he asked. "I've got a plan," I said, craving his reassurance. "I want you to review these numbers. If you spot anything else, let me know. And I might need you at the hearing next Monday. Just as moral support." "Done," he replied. "I'll clear my schedule. You're doing the right thing." His words bolstered me more than I expected. Having his support reminded me I wasn't alone. After hanging up, I arranged security cameras at our home, one at the front door, another facing the driveway, and a final one overlooking the living room's large window. I wanted a record of anyone who came to the house while Emily claimed she was working late. In the dim glow of the street lamp, I watched the installer drill the last camera bracket, the whir of the drill echoing in the quiet. A small surge of satisfaction rose in my chest, an assurance that I was reclaiming control. Saturday morning found me at the notary again, this time signing a sworn financial disclosure affidavit. My pen scratched across the pages as I listed every asset we held together: retirement accounts, the equity in our home, the Hyundai we purchased 2 years prior. I specified Emily's estimated share based on her contributions and our state's equitable distribution statutes. When I left the notary's office, the bright sun did little to lighten my mood, but I felt a growing determination. Everything was documented: evidence of infidelity, detailed financial records, custody proposals key to our daughter's best interests. On Sunday, I met with Clara in a small cafe across town, her laptop open on the table. Steam curled from our mugs as we reviewed the proposed divorce petition and temporary custody motion. Clara pointed to a section where more detail was needed: Emily's pattern of secrecy around the portrait sessions. "Add the times and dates when the studio visits occurred," she advised. "That specificity bolsters our argument." Between sips of cappuccino, I recited each date: February 14th, after her supposed book club; March 3rd, after claiming teacher workshops; April 7th, right after the parent-teacher meeting. Clara typed quickly, filling in the blanks. As I spoke, I felt a gradual shift from grief-stricken husband to competent, resolute petitioner. The ritual of recounting each detail stripped away any residual shock. It was as if I was telling someone else's story, one I could now observe with a clear mind rather than react to with raw emotion. Monday morning's courtroom was austere: tall wooden benches, a single American flag standing sentinel by the judge's bench, and the steady hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I sat beside Reynolds, my evidence folder on my lap, while Emily arrived with her own counsel. She met my gaze once, her eyes revealing shock, then shame, before she shifted her attention to her lawyer. My stomach tightened, but I straightened my back and reminded myself of the clock on the wall, its second hand ticking relentlessly forward, a reminder that time would not wait. Reynolds presented our motion for temporary custody and supported it with the affidavit I'd painstakingly drafted. He pointed to the camera footage time-stamped May 22 at 11:47 p.m., Emily and Marcus exiting the studio together. He detailed the financial discrepancies and the text messages in Marcus's hand, then proposed that our daughter remain in my care until a full hearing. Emily's attorney objected, citing her right to visitation, but the judge granted a temporary order, sole physical custody to me, supervised visitation for Emily contingent on passing a counseling evaluation and demonstrating stability. As the gavel fell, I felt relief flood through me, tempered by the knowledge that the fight was far from over. But in that moment, the symbolic wedding photo taped to the edge of the bench, a small framed image of our happier days, seemed to acquire a new meaning. It was no longer merely a relic of promises made, it was a reminder of the standards she'd broken and the life I was determined to rebuild. Walking out of the courthouse into the spring sunlight, I realized I'd reached the first milestone of my plan. The process had transformed me, from a husband adrift in betrayal to a man resolute in pursuing justice. Every notarized document, every security camera installed, and every financial disclosure filed had carved a path forward. As I climbed into my car, I clenched the steering wheel and took a deep breath. It tasted like reclaimed agency, a promise that, though I could not change the past, I could shape the future. I chose the lawyer's small conference room for our confrontation, a neutral, sterile space where emotions carried less weight. When I arrived, Emily was already seated, her posture rigid, hands clasped in her lap as if bracing herself. Marcus Reynolds sat at the head of the table, opening a leather portfolio. I placed my worn wedding photo, Emily and me beaming beneath an arch of roses, face down between us. Its cracked glass reflected the fluorescent lights, the image fractured like our marriage. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, you've asked us to present evidence of infidelity and request a fair division of assets, plus custody considerations. Let's begin." I nodded, my pulse steady under the tailor-cut suit. "Yes," I said, voice measured. "I have evidence indicating Emily's relationship with Mr. Bell. First, I'd like to present the security footage from May 22nd. I slid a DVD across the table. Reynolds popped it into his laptop and expanded the screen. Grainy nighttime footage appeared, Emily stepping from Marcus's car, her coat slipping off her shoulder, Marcus's arm guiding her toward the studio door, the timestamp reading 11:47 p.m. I watched Emily's face in the footage, her eyes lowered, lips parted as though in whispered conversation. When the clip looped, I leaned forward. That night, she told me she was visiting a friend. She was with him. Emily's breath caught. She looked away, swallowing. I pressed on. Next, here are the text transcripts between Emily and Marcus from March through June. In these messages, she explicitly discusses meeting him for private portrait sessions and confesses to emotional attachment. I handed a neatly bound packet to Reynolds. He spread the pages open, reading silently. "Mrs. Carter," he said, voice firm yet devoid of malice, "these aren't merely references to artistic collaboration. They're declarations of an intimate liaison." Emily's lips parted, and then she closed her eyes. When she spoke, her tone was subdued, almost hollow. "I didn't intend for it to go this far. I just felt understood." Her admission hung in the air like a suspended breath. Reynolds set the packets aside and turned his gaze to me. "Mr. Carter, do you have additional evidence regarding financial transactions?" I lifted a second folder, bank statements with highlighted withdrawals. "Here," I said, tapping the top page. $1, $200 on March 14th, $2,500 on April 2nd, and $900 on May 6th, all to Bell Studio, each labeled private session. She told me these were art supplies. They were payments for her and Marcus's meetings. Emily opened her eyes, glancing between us. I used those sessions to escape," she whispered. I felt lost in our routine. Her words echoed in the small room. I inhaled deeply, recalling the coffee's metallic taste that first morning. I kept my voice steady. "Escape is one thing. You betrayed our vows and our daughter's trust. You let him see your true self, and you let him see me as a lie." Emily's gaze dropped. My heart clenched, but I refused to waver. "I want a fair settlement. I'll agree to shared custody only if she's in a stable environment. I've documented everything." "The photo," I said, tapping the wedding picture, "is a symbol of promises broken. It shows what she left behind." For a moment, silence enveloped us. Then Marcus's name slipped from Emily's lips, he told me I deserved to be seen, beyond being just a wife and mother. I believed him. Her apology was quiet, but it carried the weight of every memory I cherished, birthday surprises undone, her presence in our daughter's bedtime routine replaced by absence. Reynolds closed the laptop. Given the evidence, we can proceed to draft the final terms: equitable asset division, custody as requested, and no further contact between Mrs. Carter and Mr. Bell near the child. Are you prepared to accept this, Mrs. Carter? Emily met my eyes once, a flicker of regret there. She exhaled and nodded. Yes. I felt a shift then, a moment of dominion reclaimed. The wedding photo lay between us, a broken relic, now a testament to the truth laid bare. As we rose to leave, I allowed myself a brief glance at Emily, no hatred burned in her gaze, only sorrow. I folded my arms, resolute. This was the turning point, the silent living room of our lives shuttered behind me, and a new chapter, one built on honesty and control, ready to begin. The judge's signature inked the final divorce decree late one afternoon, its edges crisp against the polished mahogany of my desk. I leaned forward to smooth the paper, reading the settlement terms: joint custody awarded, primary residence granted to me, and a clear stipulation that Emily attend counseling before any unsupervised visits. The equitable division of assets was laid out in exact figures: the house sold, proceeds split, retirement accounts divided, her share of the savings earmarked for daughter's tuition. Each number felt deliberate, a marker of justice reclaimed. That evening, I returned to our empty home where the clock above the fireplace ticked steadily, its brass frame glinting in the golden light of dusk. I reached up and wound it, feeling the familiar click of its mechanism. The same clock that once measured hours of marital bliss now measured my own passage forward. I stood back and watched the second hand move, a quiet reminder that time continued, unbroken. The following weekend, I visited my workshop in the garage, tools spread across the bench, wood shavings underfoot. Bracing my daughter's bicycle with new handlebar grips in hand, I breathed in the scent of cedar and motor oil. As she pedaled down the driveway, practicing the turns I'd patiently taught her, I felt a swell of pride, and an undercurrent of calm I hadn't known since that first morning with the unknown number text. The rhythmic scrape of sandpaper against oak echoed my own steady recovery. I began reconnecting with old friends. On Sunday afternoons, I met Mark and Clara at our local coffee shop. Over steaming lattes, I shared progress on my blog, an outlet where I detailed step-by-step guides for men coping with infidelity, gathering evidence, navigating custody, and managing emotional fallout. Clara, now a close confidant, offered editing suggestions. Mark, who'd navigated his own divorce years ago, encouraged me to speak at a community support group for betrayed spouses. My voice, once faltering with grief, grew measured and assured as I recounted my journey. One brisk morning, I stood before a small gathering at the community center, a dozen men seated in folding chairs, eyes cautious yet hopeful. I placed the same wedding photo, now encased in a simple, unadorned frame, on a side table. I told them how that broken image had become a symbol not of defeat, but of renewed purpose. As I spoke about documenting the truth and finding empowerment through action, I noticed nods of recognition. I ended by encouraging each man to reclaim his narrative, to let every tick of the clock propel him forward rather than tether him to the past. Back at home, I installed a fresh clock above my new writing desk. Its face was pristine, its hands gliding smoothly, a clear reflection of the life I was building day by day. I sat down to type a new blog entry titled, "From Betrayal to Brotherhood," describing how community and self-reclamation had sparked my healing. A framed photograph of my daughter and me, taken on her first day of second grade, sat beside the keyboard, reminding me of my greatest motivation. As evening settled and the clock chimed softly, I closed my laptop. The house was quiet, warmed by lamplight and the faint scent of cedar from my workshop. I stood and walked to the window, watching the last rays of sun fade behind the trees. In that moment, I understood that although trust had been shattered, my resolve, and the promise of each new minute, had forged a future marked by purpose, peace, and unwavering resilience.